My brother sold my mother's home while she was sick. Not after she passed away. Not with her permission. While she was lying in a hospital bed asking the nurses when she could finally go home. According to my brother, she won't mind. Standing in that hospital hallway, I realized something. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. And before it was over, I would be filing criminal charges against my own brother. The house on Birchwood Lane had been in our family for 31 years. My father, Raymond, had built the back porch himself with lumber he bought on sale and stacked in the driveway for 3 weeks before he started cutting. He planted 2 maple trees in the front yard the summer I turned 7, and they were tall enough to shade the whole yard by the time I graduated high school. There was a porch swing he built from a kit, and my mother painted white, and she repainted it every few years because she liked it to stay bright. The kitchen door frame had pencil marks going back to 1993. Heights for me and my brother Dennis, measured each birthday. Never painted over, because my mother said they were part of the house. She had yellow mixing bowls she kept on the counter even when the counter was crowded. She made apple pie every Thanksgiving from a recipe her own mother had written on an index card that she kept in a drawer with rubber bands and expired coupons and birthday candles she was saving. Every Christmas the house smelled like cinnamon because she started baking on December 1st and didn't stop until Christmas Eve. I need you to understand what that house was before I tell you what happened to it. I need you to have it in your mind. The way it looked at 4 in the afternoon in October when the maples were orange and the porch light came on automatically and my mother's silhouette was visible through the kitchen window. I need you to have it, because what my brother did to it will mean more if you know what it was first. Before I tell you how I discovered what he had done to Mom's house, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to protect someone you love from the very people who should have been protecting them too, subscribe. Because sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is hold your own family accountable. My mother's name is Eleanor. She is 77 years old. She had a stroke in March. Not a major one, but significant enough to require hospitalization and then a rehabilitation facility for 6 weeks. She was confused in the first days after it happened, the way people are when their brain has been disrupted by something it wasn't designed for. But she cleared. Slowly, steadily, she came back to herself. Her memory intact, her personality intact, her specific and unshakable opinion about the right way to fold a fitted sheet very much intact. She asked about her roses 3 times a week. She had a climbing rose on the back fence that my father had planted as an anniversary gift 18 years ago, and she worried about whether anyone was watering it and whether the aphids she had noticed in February had come back. I told her I was checking on the house twice a week. I was. My brother Dennis is 4 years older than me and has been, for most of his adult life, a man who is always about to turn a corner. He has started businesses I cannot fully account for, carried debts that seemed to circulate among various accounts and credit cards with a fluidity that made tracking them difficult, and approached every financial crisis with the serene confidence of someone who believes the next opportunity is always close enough to solve the current problem. He is not a bad person in the way that some people are bad, cold, calculating, indifferent. He is bad in the more familiar and harder to address way. He convinces himself. He looks at a situation and he locates the version of events in which what he wants to do is also the right thing to do, and then he inhabits that version completely. He had been telling himself for years that Mom's house would eventually be his. He had simply moved up the timeline. I was in the hospital visiting Mom on a Tuesday afternoon in April when it happened. She was in better spirits than she had been. She had eaten a Real breakfast. She had complained about the hospital coffee with genuine feeling, which I always took as a good sign. She was asking me about her neighbor Mrs. Patterson and whether the hydrangeas on the corner had started coming in yet. Then Dennis said there was something we needed to discuss. He said it the way he says most things. Casually, as if what he's about to tell you is a minor administrative detail rather than something that will change the shape of a day. He said he had taken care of the house. That a buyer had been found. That things had moved quickly because that was how the market was right now and you couldn't hesitate. That it had all been handled. My mother's face went through several things. Confusion first. then the particular attentiveness of someone who needs to make sure they understood a sentence correctly. She said, "What do you mean, handled?" He said the house had sold. He said the process had been started a few weeks ago and finalized recently. He said it was the practical thing to do while she was in the hospital, that the property taxes were due, and the maintenance was complicated, and that she shouldn't have to worry about it. My mother said, "Dennis, I didn't agree to sell my house." He said, "Mom, you won't mind. Stay with me." Because when I brought my mother's medical records to an elder abuse attorney, everything changed. I left the hospital that evening without saying much. Not because I was calm, I was not calm, but because I have learned, over the years, that how you leave a room determines what you can do next. I went home. I called an attorney I had found 6 months earlier when I had started noticing things about Dennis's involvement in my mother's finances that had made me uneasy. I had her number saved. What Dennis did not know was that I had been paying attention for longer than he realized. 3 weeks before my mother's stroke, he had asked her to sign documents he described as routine estate planning updates. She had mentioned it to me in passing, and I had asked her what specifically she had signed. She didn't remember the details. When I pressed, she said Dennis had explained everything and that it was all standard. I had made a note of it and filed it in the back of my mind as something to follow up on. After the hospital conversation, I followed up. The house had been sold. That much was confirmed quickly when I looked up the property record online. It had transferred to a new owner 11 days earlier. The sale had been processed through a real estate transaction that used a power of attorney document Dennis had obtained. Here is what a power of attorney means. It is authorization for one person to act on behalf of another in legal and financial matters. My mother had given Dennis a limited power of attorney 2 years earlier, for the specific purpose of managing her financial accounts if she was incapacitated and could not act for herself. The document had specific language about its scope. The sale of real property was not within that scope. What the attorney told me over the phone that evening, and then again in more detail in her office 2 days later, was that the transaction appeared to involve the use of a power of attorney outside its authorized scope. That the timing, a transaction completed while my mother was hospitalized and on significant medication, was a significant concern. That the signatures on the sale documents warranted professional examination. That what I was describing had a name: elder financial abuse. I sat in that attorney's office and thought about my mother asking about her roses. What would you do if someone sold your parents' home without their permission? Let me know in the comments below, because I'm going to tell you exactly what I did. I went back to the hospital the next morning and I sat with my mother and I told her everything I had found. Not all at once. Carefully. The way you tell someone difficult news when you need them to understand it and also not be destroyed by it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Why didn't he ask me?" She said it the way people say things when the answer would be too painful to hear out loud. She said, "I would have helped him if he needed money. He knows that." She said, "That house was your father's dream." I held her hand for a while. I did not tell her it was going to be okay, because I did not know yet whether it was. What I did tell her was that I was going to do everything I could, that I had already started. The attorney filed a formal complaint with the state elder abuse hotline within the week. A separate referral went to local law enforcement. I gathered everything I could. Medical records showing my mother's condition and medication levels during the period the documents were signed, the original power of attorney with its specific scope limitations, the deed transfer records, and a timeline I had reconstructed with dates and details. There were family members who had opinions. My aunt said Dennis was still my brother. A cousin said that going to the police was going too far, that this was a family matter that should be handled in the family. I listened to each of these people and I understood where they were coming from, and I filed the complaint anyway. Because here is what I knew that they perhaps did not fully reckon with. My mother was lucid. She had not authorized the sale. The house had been taken from her while she lay in a hospital bed worrying about her roses. And the person who had taken it had told her she wouldn't mind. The detectives contacted Dennis about 3 weeks after I filed the complaint. I was not present for that conversation. I heard about it afterward, from my mother's attorney, who had been in contact with the investigators. Dennis had told them he was helping, that he had simply been managing things while Mom couldn't, that everyone would understand once they saw the full picture. The detective had asked a straightforward question. If you were helping, why were the proceeds from the sale transferred into your personal checking account? Dennis had no answer for that. He called me that night. His voice was the voice of someone who has rehearsed a conversation several times and is hoping one of the versions will land. He said I was ruining his life. He said he was family. He said Mom would forgive him. I said, no. I said, selling Mom's house while she was sick did this. Not me. He said I didn't understand the pressure he had been under. I said I understood perfectly. I said I had watched my mother ask about her roses from a hospital bed for 6 weeks, and I had sat with her when she learned her house was gone, and I had seen her face when she said your father's dream. I said I understood the pressure of being the person in the family who actually shows up. He hung up. If you've ever been called the difficult one simply because you refuse to stay quiet, subscribe. Because protecting the people we love isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's the only thing that's ever been right. The legal process moved with the particular measured pace of legal processes. The property sale was challenged through the civil court on the basis that the power of attorney had been used outside its authorized scope. The criminal investigation ran parallel. The signatures on the documents were examined by a forensic expert who raised specific concerns about the notarization timeline. 5 months after the sale, a court order froze the proceeds, pending resolution of the civil challenge. 6 months after that, the sale was voided. The original buyer was compensated through the legal process. They had acted in good faith and were made whole. The house on Birchwood Lane came back. Dennis entered a plea agreement on a reduced charge. He made restitution. He is required to have no involvement in my mother's finances for the foreseeable future. I'm not going to describe what I felt when that agreement was finalized, because what I felt was complicated and not entirely satisfying in the way that justice in the abstract promises to be. He is my brother. I grew up with him. I know what he looked like at 8 years old. But I also know what my mother looked like when she asked why he hadn't just asked her. I drove her home on a Saturday morning in October. The maples my father planted were turning orange, just beginning. The porch swing was still there. The kitchen looked exactly as it had. Her yellow mixing bowls were on the counter where I had left them. She walked in slowly, the way she still moves when she is taking something in rather than just passing through. She noticed my father's old recliner. She noticed the photographs on the hall wall. She stood at the kitchen window for a moment and looked out at the garden. And she said, very quietly, I thought I'd never see home again. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that was bigger than that moment. Families aren't measured by who shares your name. They're measured by who protects the vulnerable when protection is the hardest thing to offer. Could you ever file charges against your own sibling to protect your parent? I truly want to know. My brother thought Mom wouldn't mind losing her home. What he forgot was that some things aren't his to give away. And some daughters will fight for what's right, no matter whose name they have to put on the report.